On this week's edition of the Entrepreneurs at Scale podcast, I'm delighted to be joined by Roheel Ahmad. Roheel is the managing partner of Forsyth Barnes, one of the fastest growing recruitment companies in the UK. Roheel, a very warm welcome. Just first off, tell us a little about yourself and Forsyth Barnes.
Probably talk for hours, to be honest, Neil. Myself and FB, 35-year-old gent who lives in Bucks at the moment, two kids, two very young kids, and a lovely wife at home. Running the business since 2016 with my co-founder. So we're now in our eighth year. FB in the mid-senior exec space, operate across online retail, what we internally call e-tail, sports and entertainment, and the fintech sectors currently. So it gives an overview as well. So bootstrapped organization, we're doing pretty well for ourselves.
You are doing unbelievably well, in terms of the growth that you've enjoyed over the last 3 years. I would contest. So, what got you into being an entrepreneur in the first place?
I would probably have to say influence came from my dad from a really young age, to be honest. It's something that he always pushed. An immigrant came over here in 1966, no education, no formal training or anything. I think he was 14 when he came over here, and just worked his way up. So that influence that kind of came from him, even though just prior to being born, we'd lost everything financially and just about kept our family home. That kind of filtered through. So in a lot of respects, learned the value of money and hard work from a really young age, because dad had to graft all over again through my childhood. But then it's something that he always kind of pushed, and he got back into property. Or he lost everything when I was born, and then he slowly, through my teenage years, got back into property and kind of start to build up again and everything as well. So I think seeing his traits set me up, and that was probably the most important thing.
Yeah, I mean, you hear that a lot of entrepreneurs do come from some really challenging circumstances. What inspiration did you take from the way that your father had sort of overcome all that adversity?
Um, I will give you an example, which isn't necessarily an easy example, but I can't remember how old I was, maybe about 12-ish or so. I had woken up on a Saturday morning. So my dad used to have a taxi in Northampton. I'd woken up on a Saturday morning, and I could see my mum a little bit frantic, and she's got loads of cloths covered in red stains on them. And there was blood stains all over. I look out and she's cleaning my dad's car. I'm thinking, what on earth is going on here? And what had happened that night is my dad was attacked by a passenger who tried to rob him. He'd been stabbed 7 times. The knife just missed his jugular. And obviously, mum and dad weren't in the best moods or the most talkative. I'm just trying to understand what on earth is going on. And the response was, I have to get your dad's car ready to clean because he needs to go to work tonight. So that work ethic, he never had the opportunity to have a day off, whether he wanted to or not. He never had the luxury of a holiday. He never had the luxury of, I'm not in the mood today. I don't have the motivation today, because he had to put food on the table for us. So that is, I think, is intrinsically somewhere. I'm not going to say it's anywhere near the same level, but that was imprinted on me from a young age.
Yeah, and it's amazing. Again, you hear these stories that, and some of them may be hard to recount and whatever, but that gives you that sort of inner drive that others may not have. So thanks very much for sharing that, Roheel. So, what got you around to founding Forsyth Barnes?
So really, I'll put this at God's grace, was really fortunate to meet my business partner and co-founder, Scott Parsons. We entered the industry pretty much together at the same time, just a few months apart. We got paired together just by chance by the business that we're working at the time. And really quickly, similar type of personalities, although different backgrounds, similar type of personalities, similar ambitions, similar kind of confidence levels, very similar competitive levels between us as well. And we just kind of gelled from there, and we've worked together pretty much since 2010. And so friendship first before anything else. Trust is there and so on as well. So I think he's also got that entrepreneurial spirit before. He's did something whilst he was at university, set up a business called Shake Club at Sheffield Meadowhall. while he was still at uni. So he always had that spirit in him as well. So the fact that the two of us kind of came together, I think, was more born of frustration that the kind of people we were working for, as much as we respected them and they had good track records, they just probably didn't have the same level as ambition as we had at the time. So probably that would be the driving force.
Yeah. So one can contest there are an awful lot of recruitment agencies all around the UK. What makes you different?
Coming back to that same thing, that ambition. I love our industry. It's offered us opportunity on an individual scale and as a business that very few other sectors would have been able to offer us in such a short time frame. But I'm also incredibly frustrated with our industry as well, because not a massive amount has changed for the end customer, which is the client or the candidate, over the last 2 to 3 decades. There hasn't been enough change and innovation. When I look at the sectors that we work in, the way we bank, the way we shop, the kind of experience when you're visiting sporting grounds now, so much of that has changed. And yet, why is our industry still largely operating on practices born from 2 or 3 decades ago? So that ambition to drive change and innovation is absolutely huge for us as a business, and not limiting ourselves by the beliefs that you can often find in our sector.
So what sectors would you focus in on?
I take a lot more personal inspiration from the tech sectors and those unicorn businesses. It's an easy get out to say, well, they've raised tens or hundreds of millions and they're spending that money and that's why they've grown. And yes, they have, but they've also had to do something with that money. And that's what I tend to look at, of how they gone and hired so many people, how they onboarded successfully so many people, how they implemented their processes, what tech stacks do they use, how do they communicate in their businesses, how can we take inspiration from those businesses who are scaled at a size and rate larger than any business in our industry ever has done. And if we can replicate even a smidgen of that for those true unicorn businesses, again, we'll be one of the most preeminent businesses in our sector.
And you mentioned a few minutes ago, Real, this notion of ambition, but also driving change. Can you point to so many examples of change or innovation that you've already brought into the industry?
So we do some amazing things with our global bear moss, if you like, your Nikes and so on. But actually, this platform is much more of a growth and enablement platform for growing and scaling businesses. So a typical kind of customer for that type of platform is a fashion brand that might be looking to IPO over the next sort of 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Through their subscription to our platform, they'll be able to go onto there and there'll be information and access to resources and people who have been through that type of journey previously. And the way we're looking to implement tech and AI in the background to the system is essentially means that it's a platform that no one else is doing out there, but should deliver the value for the customers that have their subscription.
So you mentioned machine learning and AI,
Yep.
hot topic at the moment. Yeah, what else
Yep.
are you doing to embrace AI and predictive sort of technology?
So really, really topical actually, because I sat with Scott, my co-founder, literally 2 days ago, where we've looked at all of our business's internal processes, um, redesigned some of those in the way we want to operate internally, what would add the most value to our customers
Yeah.
as well, and then said whether the systems exist, whether the technology exists right now, what do we want our internal systems to do and how do we want them to operate, which gives us the most value and our people the most value, which creates the greatest efficiencies internally, which creates the greatest focus for our people internally, which is therefore adding value to our customers as well. We've just done all that. We don't even know if some of that tech or capability exists right now, but we have mapped it out and designed it. From here, Scott now goes away to an AI professional, a contractor that he's already got a relationship with. They have to go away and do a whole exploratory project of, does it exist? Does it not exist? They have to do vendor selection. They have to piece the whole thing together. We think that this will be circa an 18-month project if we implement it really, really well. So that's the end goal. How do we get there? What's kind of one step closer over the next 6 months? What's 2 steps closer over the next 12? And how can we really reach our end goal in 18? I guess the one challenge we've got with that is in 18 months, tech capabilities can be far advanced of what we can even picture right now as well. But I guess what we've tried to do is not be constrained by any of the technologies that are out there right now. We've actually done a best case scenario, not understanding whether that capability exists currently
Yeah,
and can we get it built. So 2 days ago, we've just gone through that whole
fascinating.
exercise, which is a whole day thing.
Yeah, and I think whatever industry you're in, I think being open to it is so important. Start like you're doing with Scott, having some scenario planning in terms of how you may be able to embrace it. I sound like also bringing on an implementer who understands AI and getting them sort of to be able to give you some consultancy is probably another good tip.
Yeah.
Where people who are just embarking on this exercise to really map out what is the art of the possible. To know really
Yeah, it's
stage
they're
advice.
a specialist, so it makes sense to do that. We could have had a stab at it ourselves, but if
Yeah,
we're serious about doing this, then why would we not get a specialist in this field?
100%. And I think that is going to be a hot area. I'm actually working with one or two myself at the moment in this space, and they're obviously excited about what opportunities it's going to bring them to be consultants. In what's going to be one of the hottest areas in the years to come. So we are seeing unprecedented change. We've also had the pandemic, and I guess that may have brought certain challenges to your business. Real, how do you overcome? We'll go about overcoming adversity and sort of the challenges that inevitably come with growing a business.
It's a funny thing because we were actually talking about this just a few weeks ago, and for probably whilst we are still in COVID and probably the first 18 months outside of it, we kept defaulting to the natural picture of ignorance is bliss and naivety served us really well because we hadn't run a business through anything like this. We hadn't run a business in the '08 financial crash. We weren't even in the industry personally back then. We started off in 2010 in the kind of dregs of what was left, right? But actually, I was thinking about this more in detail the other day and discussing it previously and thinking it wasn't actually because of that. That was a bit of a lazy analysis that we'd done on it. It was more our mindset and our. I remember the kind of conversations we were having, and we pretty quickly got to a point of saying, unless we were going to become an MP and trying to do something in Parliament to change rhetoric and what the government was doing, which we weren't about to do, unless we were going to put our placard up and start protesting, which we couldn't even do at the time anyway, but we weren't willing to do. We needed to focus on what we could impact around us. Don't get bogged down by the noise. Shut up about the complaints, if I'm being really honest, and just focus on the people that we can help and our own people and looking after ourselves and our own people every day. And if we're doing that and looking after ourselves and the business, we will do well. We didn't let the narrative of COVID affect us to say, oh, that means 2020 is written off, or this is going to be a negative year. Every year prior to that, we'd had year-on-year growth. And it was when we turned around, I can't remember the exact month. I mean, we went lockdown March 23rd. I think it might have been May, June time. I sat with our senior leadership team and said, please trust me on this. We are not reducing our targets that we set at the beginning of the year. We will hit them, but we have to pivot and change our approach a little bit. If we thought we were working hard before, we have to find two or three more gears. If we
Mm.
thought what we were doing was smart before, we have to get and work even smarter. If we thought that we were working with good, committed clients, we have to raise the levels of what that looks like so we don't get tire kickers and we don't get people wasting our time and therefore their own time and so on as well. So we actually made a few key changes in the way that we operated as a business, and not only did we hit the target, not only did we surpass the target, but actually 2020 we grew as a
Yeah.
business. And I come back to that thing of mindset and just not willing to use it as a bit of an excuse, if I'm honest. I caveat that somewhat by I don't want to sound rude. A lot of people are affected. I was affected by COVID in the sense of lost two family members from it,
Wow.
close family members. So it wasn't that we were kind of ignoring the effects or impacts of COVID, but with all due respect, my kind of cousins and passing away as a result of it wasn't going to do anything for someone who worked for us in the business or wasn't going to impact their personal lives. You've got to put that to the side.
Yeah, I think it is one of the ingredients of being successful. Having the right mindset, having a resilient mindset as well. But I think what the other thing I picked up from what you were saying there was this importance of caring for your people. And I think there's a recent Gallup survey that's come out that, on the one hand, shows some really galling data about how many employees are disengaged. 20% of employees around the world are actively disengaged. And one of the things that, again, sort of people crave for is to be in an environment where they feel cared for. I think that's even more so for younger people as well. So it's really interesting that was really in part of your playbook.
Yeah, it was. We tried to do as much as we could on a daily basis over Zooms at the time, before we could start to get back in. And whether that was games of Through the Keyhole, whether that was cook-offs and bake-offs all on Zooms, training sessions we were doing with across the business, sort of 2-3 day training sessions when there was no market through March and April. Like, engagement was huge for us.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, I think it's going to be a unique time. Obviously, coming out of that time, it has changed the way that we maybe think, and certainly your work practices. How many colleagues have you got now in the business?
So we're pushing 80 people globally now.
Sorry,
And we're pushing 80 people
80
globally
people.
now.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
you've just, have I read, you've recently opened a New York office.
So physically, yeah, we have. So we're just celebrating our 1 year anniversary out there.
Yep.
We officially opened 5th of July last year. Again, a result of COVID, we were meant to be out, and the original plan was to be out there in 2020, summer sort of 2020. But borders got shut, and we had to bide our time. As soon as the borders opened up again, we had business exemption, so we were over there at the back end of 21 through early 22. And then as soon as the embassies opened up again, we had 5 people, 5 of our very best kind of volunteered and relocated out there permanently.
Yeah.
And we've been growing the office from there now.
Yeah. So 80 colleagues. I guess at this stage now, any organization that's scaling quickly, this is where you have to really focus it on culture and making sure that you've got an amazing culture that if you're going to replicate in new cities or new countries, that you're able to make sure you protect that. So just tell me a bit about what the culture is like across Forsyth Barnes.
I would say we're always striving for that high performance, high standards culture. We're incredibly competitive as a business overall, as well as individuals, and that's not just in business and the financials. That is in growth. That is in sport that we play internally. That is in everything that we do. We're always trying to outdo ourselves and each other. I think they're two of the kind of main things. It is attention to detail across the business as well. It's ambition and drive. So pretty much, I don't think there's anything in this business that we put a minimum sort of time frame or time limit to. Progression is all done on your own performance, and it's true meritocracy in that way. I've got people who have achieved in their first 9 or 12 months in the industry with us more than some people achieve in sort of 4 or 5 years. I've got people who have grown and are managing a team of 5 in about 15 months with us.
Yeah.
Like, where else would give you that type of opportunity in our industry? And don't get me wrong, they're not fully fledged and they're not fully ready and experienced, but we're giving them that opportunity to gain that experience. So don't believe in your age as opposed to all of this. If you're good enough, you're old enough.
Yeah. And I think one of the areas that I think, again, companies struggle on is really getting to that time when you get to discover your core values. So tell me a bit about Epic and how that kind of really informs your core values.
So Epic was born from us in leadership at the time. We kind of sat in a room, banded about all the things that were really important to us as a business. And it was a tough task. It took all day, and there was kind of 100 different things written up, and getting that down to 50 and 25 and 10. And then from 10, you kind of think you've jettisoned everything. You don't really want to get rid of the 10 things that are left. But you can't have 10 values. Otherwise, you can't instill them and implement them and everything as well. So I think Epic really does embody what we try to do as a business as well, from an internal and external perspective as well. Where we talk about pioneering solutions, we're trying to live that through things like the tech platform, through transitioning our business to become a product-based organization as well. That commitment, I think commitment can be viewed in so many different ways, internally, externally, commitment to our clients, commitment to your own personal career, commitment to your team, commitment to the business, commitment to the very process that you're trying to see out in terms of what your role is as well. So honestly, I look at those four core values, and I honestly think that they seep through into everyone's kind of daily lives here in the business.
Yeah, I think yeah, just hearing you speak about commitment, then I think again as a CEO, as a managing partner, one of your roles as a leader is to consistently be living the values, consistently being able to communicate what does commitment mean, what does excellence mean, what does a pioneering spirit mean. So I think that's on the one hand. What else are you doing to consistently live the values across the company?
Even on an individual basis, I mean, I've had a missed call whilst we're on here. Good thing it's on silent. But it's one of my SVPs out in New York at the moment who we're talking about. Do I take an immediate flight out to Miami for a potential pitch that we've got? I've got things planned. I've got things at home planned, and so on as well. But again, that's a commitment from the cause, not just from myself, but from him because he's got things planned as well.
Yeah,
But are we for the opportunity and to support the client that we're talking about here? Do we go out and see these guys to help them on the issues that they need some support and help with? Where most, I think, would turn around and say, well, let's just do it on a Zoom. And we could probably get it done on a Zoom, but I don't think the client would get the value that they would get from us if we're sitting across the table with them face to face. And that there's expense that comes with that and so on. We're not billing them with that. There isn't a guarantee at this stage that there's anything in it for us at this point. And they may just walk away from it afterwards, and they may even implement the things that we've recommended to them afterwards as well.
mm.
That's commitment to the longer term partnership that we're willing, and the work that we're willing to put in, and the expense that we're willing to risk to go and do that as well.
Yeah, I guess these are stories that become fabled over time that
Yeah,
instruct everything the way you think, the way you construct your team, your SVPs about this is what commitment looks like in this organization. I think again, you're absolutely right. This is an example of how you can just bring that alive and walk the walk and walk the talk, as it were. Jim Collins, in his fable book Good to Great, talks about this notion of having a big, hairy, audacious goal. I don't know if you've read Good to Great or not, or come across it.
I've it's literally the next on the list. I'm about 93% my current book,
Yeah,
and then that's the next one on the list.
yeah, amazing. But actually, I would recommend even more Great by Choice as a mid-market company than Good to Great. Good to Great is amazing for bigger corporates. I'd highly recommend the Great by Choice that Jim Collins really writes more for the mid-market companies, in my mind, around that. But if you did have a big, hairy, audacious goal, you envision what do the organization look like in 20 years' time? We're having this conversation. What does that look like?
I mean, we've got something which is even now. I'm not waiting for 20 years, to be honest with you, Neil. We've got a vision that we've set out as a business where we take this business public over the next 4 to 5 years.
Nice.
So we want to list it on the AIM.
Yeah.
We've done the maths. We're pretty confident of what we're going to achieve. But over the next 4 to 5 years, we want to create a minimum £60 million business.
Yeah.
And we've got that's not a random figure. That's born with science behind it. I say minimum because if we can, over that time period, achieve what I think we can achieve on the tech platform and become a product-based organization, I think we'll look at that £60 million and laugh and say we were playing too small.
Yeah.
Now, again, many in my industry will say the arrogance behind it and they don't know what they're talking about and so on. I look at other businesses of which I respect, which are currently much larger than us, who have been around sort of two plus decades. And we're in our 8th year now, we're ahead of all those businesses financially, net profit, gross profit, rev, EBIT, all of those kind of key metrics, headcount, where they were in their 8th year. Now, that doesn't guarantee us that we will stay ahead, but we're on a good track record for where we are right now. So that gives us good confidence.
Yeah, I think, and again, having this sort of guiding North Star that if it's 60 million, that you're absolutely all focused in on and almost as a vivid vision, it just brings that the chance of that happening to be more likely. Now, again, urge all our listeners just to make sure that you've got a really clear vision of what great looks like. Because it's what's the old adage of if you shoot for the moon or whatever it is, you might not necessarily get there, but you get much further down the road around that. And you're already, I think I'm right in saying, if you're on the FTSE, you're one of the sort of fastest growing sort of companies within the 250 or of
Financial Times, yeah. 250, yeah. We've been recognised as that 3 years for 3 years now. As one of the fastest growing businesses, and again, probably one of the things that makes us most proud about that is we're completely organic. We
Yeah.
have not borrowed a pound or a penny from anyone. So everything that we've done has been off the back of the hard work by everyone in the business
Yeah.
and the repeated successes that we've had with our and for our clients as well. So yeah, whereas I think the number of something like 85, 86% of the other businesses on that indices as well is they're all kind of externally funded.
Yeah. Now, I want to move on now to probably in my mind one of the most topical conversations that is exercising so many CEOs, MDs we work with right now, and that's the topic of attracting, recruiting, developing, and retaining talent, which is right in
Yeah.
your wheelhouse in terms of
Yep.
what you do around that. So, what are you seeing? What trends are you seeing right now when it comes to hiring talent? Because I think one of the things we hear consistently is how difficult it is to find really good players. There's potentially people out there, but how do you go about attracting real A players? So two questions really: what trends are you seeing, and then what tips or advice would you give for organisations in this area?
I think we're now starting to see a shift of the way businesses operate and do look to attract talent, even just from a mindset shift. I think before it was very, very transactional. There is still that to a large degree, but I do think that businesses are now starting to wake up to the fact that no longer can they do that. Even the little things. I think previously mindset was, well, if they want a job, they'll join us. I shouldn't really need to put too much effort into it. Now I'm starting to see more of a shift towards, well, actually, we need to attract them. It's a bit more of a two-way street and an expectation of what do I need to do to get this person secured, as opposed to, well, they should want to join us. So that's one trend. So repeat the second one for me.
I think it's just seeing those trends, and then what are you doing in terms of really helping people attracting top talent, and what are you doing to attract top talent yourselves in Forsyth Barnes?
So for and with our clients, again, it's first thing is that educational piece of and really understanding where they're at and how they go about doing it currently. Can we add value? Or are they very well set? Because there's no point in us trying to help them on something that they clearly don't need help with. But I would probably say one of the major things that we're doing is help create a narrative and a story and market them in a very, very different way to A, what they've considered themselves, and B, what they're getting from any current partner. So if I think of some of the approaches that we take for some of our clients, and we've done this for, again, those global corporates. We've done it for the likes of a Real Madrid, a Renault F1, and Wagamamas and so on, those really well-known brands. But we've also done it for a tech business called AdZoom. We've done it for a beauty business called InkyList. These guys, we marketed them in a way that, and in such a way that is, first of all, attracts people from different platforms in terms of digital media. And actually, we're creating marketing campaigns for them and trying to really get the essence of their business, their culture, their atmosphere, their environment through a talent attraction campaign. And it's how you go about doing that. I think, again, what's been the age old way of attracting talent? Oh, I'll write up a JD or a job advert.
Yeah.
And it's pretty much the same thing, right? Let me get a paragraph on the business, which will put a few things in there. I'll put a few bullet points or a prose paragraph of what the job is and maybe some bits of about expectations. I will put a few bullet points on the key responsibilities or the needs of the individual. Must have 5 years of this, must have 5 years of that. That used to get published in newspapers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Then that went to online and job boards. Now the majority of that is LinkedIn and platforms like an Indeed. Has that changed much?
Mm.
Like over, and we come back to the same thing. What's really changed over the last 2 or 3 decades? And that is still the go-to for too many businesses in the majority of the marketplace out there as well. And we're now in an age where so much media is consumed by on things like TikTok and Reels and stories and so on and so forth as well, and video content. Why, as an industry, are we not transitioning our clients to there? Why the client base not transitioning to market themselves there through there? Because you can put so much more emphasis on culture, ambition, and get so much more of the business out there than just through the same old format that was devised from 3 decades ago. So they're the kind of marketing campaigns and traction campaigns that we run for our clients. And honestly, when I've put some of what we've done for our previous clients in front of CEOs currently for prospective clients, they look at us and say, No one's doing that for us.
Yeah.
I want that. I want my business represented like that. Brilliant. All you
Yeah.
need to do is work with us. We can put this together.
Yeah.
We do all the hard work, but it looks like it's produced from their marketing department.
So you basically make it easy
Yeah.
for them to
Like
hire
if
talent.
I
Yeah.
if I look at the way that we internally within FB, we offer our people now, we're now at a place where we're able to roll it out to our end clients.
Yeah.
And again, it's the same thing. I ask a client, how do you make an offer to someone? Well, I pick up the phone or I get them on a Zoom and I tell them the offer and ask them how do they want to accept and et cetera, et cetera. There is no thought towards the psychology behind it. There's no thought to the two-way street behind it. There's no thought to, as well as what you will add to the business, this is what we'll add to you in your development and so on.
Yeah.
Re-emphasizing that. There's no thought to actually, this is the why we want you behind it, not just the fact that we do want you behind it. And again, discussing their progression and where it leads to next and so on and so forth, and where it fits into that individual's career. So they're all the things that we do internally when we're hiring for FB. Now we're rolling it out for our clients. And the presentation that we put together looks like it's a document that's been produced by the client itself. We don't need plaudits on that. Like the client knows what we do and don't do for them. But the candidate has to see that and think, this is how much they want me, because I've never seen an offer process run like this before.
So one of the challenges a lot of businesses have is they don't have a particularly good recruitment process, if
Yeah.
having any sort of recruitment process at all. Just
Yeah.
talk me through the process that you have at FB, and yeah, just give us an understanding of how you go about hiring talent.
So, I mean, working with clients internally, we have a very streamlined process in terms of that as well. It's competency based.
Okay.
One of the things I'd advise for any of our clients, and we've done the same thing ourselves, is actually understanding what an A-star person is in your business.
Yep.
Everyone wants A-star people in their business, right? How can you actually attract that if you don't know what that is in your particular business? And maybe you don't have them right now, and maybe you have an understanding of what that you want that to look like, but you don't have them. So it's understanding what that looks like. It's then and making sure that there has been some formal training around how to interview. The majority of people that hire people actually don't really know how to technically run an interview. And too much of it is impacted by how they feel on the particular day, how stressed they are, how well rested they are, what mood they're in, what their diary's like, and so on as well. And so you need to kind of take away those subjective elements that could positively or negatively impact the process. Things like unconscious bias as well. We need to train around that. And we've had internal training from external specialist providers to ensure we try to remove that from our own processes ourselves. So internally, we run typically like a three-stage process. Each stage is run differently. Whilst it's a three-stage process, that doesn't mean it's always run on 3 separate days. We can, and if there's a need to, we can do that all in one day before. It's all competency-based. We run and operate a scorecard type system, which has already been pre-devised and pre-trained on and so on as well. And it's trying to get underneath the skin of the face value level of the answers. Each stage is looking for a few different elements in terms of those kind of core competencies that we are looking for, or personality traits that we look for as well. And they are done by different people. So no one person is kind of in charge or responsible for the whole thing, because if they are biased unconsciously in any way, the whole thing can go one way or the other. Whereas if you've kind of got 3 people involved in it, and like if I'm doing a third or final stage, I will do a bit of a recap on the previous things. Is there consistency in performance from the person I'm interviewing? Is there consistency in answer from the previous interviews and so on as well? We run it pretty independently until the very end. I then get together with whoever's run the previous stages, and then we share feedback as well. So when I go into any interview, I don't go with any preconditioned notions of that individual, positive or negative or otherwise, and I'm making my own assessment. Try to take the subjective out of it and say, well, look, based on the technical basis of their answer, this is what I've scored them. And then we have kind of criteria in there that is they must have this, but they must have this minimum level of scoring on this particular competency now, or they must have demonstrated this, that they've got the ability to kind of develop that later on. We don't need that skill just yet. And if it doesn't matter whether I like them or not, If they don't pass on that scoring, they don't pass.
And you pick up a really interesting point there, a scorecard. One of the resources we highly recommend is a book by a guy called Jeff Smart, and if you come across it at all, called Who, which is again a fantastic guide to hiring A players. And Jeff really advocates the benefit of having a scorecard. So just again for our listeners, just elaborate a bit more about the benefits of a scorecard and how do you construct it?
Yeah, so we went through a process in doing it, and your first iteration is rarely the final iteration of it. You play around with it a little bit. It's actually, first of all, you need a few common denominators in your business. So what are the typical traits of the people that you want, right? Because you can't attract your top A-level players until you actually know what that is, and do you have that in the business right now? We were fortunate enough to have those in the business, but then we kind of went through and said, right, what are the underlying common denominators across this group of people that really shows that they're most likely to be successful coming into our business? And that's what we do with our clients as well.
Yeah.
We try to help them to understand that. Once we've done that, the actual next bit, even before getting to the scorecard, is what's your story? Why should an A-level player want to join you? How you position yourselves in the marketplace, and actually to individuals and so on as well. Because you won't actually attract anyone to get to the scorecard section until you've even got that and attracting the right people in the right way. So how are you marketing yourselves? What's your EVP, your employee value proposition?
Yeah.
At that point, then we can start to get through the interview phases and the scorecards as well. So for us, we have, I think it's in like 8 values or 8 competencies, shall we call them, where we're testing on about 3 at each one. So it's 3, 3, and 2 through our process. At the very end, I'll do a bit of a recap on some of the previous ones. I can't get through every single one. We look for evidence-based answers on that scorecard. So where they've truly demonstrated that, the whys behind it, the why did they go down that particular route. I'll often kind of come back to things later on to see if their reasoning behind something that they told me earlier was consistent with the reason they're giving me now, and the thought process is the same. And if the thought process and the approach doesn't match, then I've got a lot of red flags which are coming up at that time as well. Is it consistent with what they may have said to the person at the second stage, who's already kind of gone through that core competency as well? And then we score it quite simply out of 4. With the key things that someone needs to have now, it's have they scored a 3 or a 4 based on the evidence that they've provided. Now, even if I think that they've got that experience, if I've kind of asked in 2 or 3 different ways and they cannot demonstrate it to me through evidence, again, if I'm then passing them on that, that's me being subjective, and that's probably my bias leading me down that. If they can't evidence that to me, or they're just not understanding the question, and I've asked it in 2 or 3 different ways, then there's not much I can do, and I can only go on what's presented to me in that interview.
Yeah, no, it's really, really powerful. Now, I mentioned the book Who by Jeff Smart. We'll put that in the show notes, and again, very practical guide to how you go. But I think he calls it the 4 S's of sourcing great candidates. Then you pull together a scorecard. Then you need to make sure that you've got a selection process of the other S. And then if they're the right people, they're probably already employed, somewhere else. So you need to sell the sizzle of why they should work for you. So really, really valuable stuff. So you've got a great new player that's come into your company. How do you then go about onboarding someone into HB? What are the sort of processes you bring about for great onboarding?
So whilst we have a structured onboarding, if I had to kind of boil it down to a few key points, even one key point, make sure that they're surrounded by our current great players or A players in the business.
Yeah.
If you're doing that, they're picking up those that bleed the business anyway, those that embody the processes to the very internally. We've got something called the FB way. So it's making sure that they're picking up the right habits. I'm a firm believer that the formal element of onboarding and training will account for between 15 to 20% of someone's patterns of behavior and work practices. The majority of what they'll pick up will be through their own doing, and the majority of where they'll pick that up is from what they're seeing around them. So if they're seeing a substandard level of performance or process being implemented and that around them, they will come down to that level. Whereas if they're being driven to ensure that those standards are performed every single time to the very best level, they'll rise to that, or they'll stay at that level as well. Just making sure that they're surrounded. We even were talking pretty recently in the last couple of weeks about the data that shows surrounding people in a business by the best performers, and how impactful that can be. So the psychology and the importance of if you've got an open floor sort of desk plan in the office, of how important it is to think about that really critically, rather than just kind of putting anyone anywhere and, oh, that person over there because that's an empty seat. So again, these are all the things that we're interested in for those 1% gains.
Amazing, amazing. And I think we know that the number one demotivator for A players is having to put up with the C players, and not
Yeah,
necessarily the B, but having to put up with bozos. And
yeah.
I think, maybe for another day, a conversation around what do you do, or how do you deal with people who aren't necessarily a good fit for your culture, and the like. But I just want to keep picking up. So we talked about onboarding. How are you going about growing and training and coaching your colleagues to make sure that you are extracting their full potential?
So I think the very first thing comes back to the mindset thing and the ambition of our business as well as our people in that as well. And they take a lot from the business as well, and a lot of the influence in terms of that ambition. We don't limit people by age or lack of experience. My first thing is I will try and give everyone an opportunity, so long as they'll put the work ethic in
Yeah,
and try to implement the training that's given to them. I don't care how old you are, how much or how little experience you have in a particular area as well. I will back you, put in the work. We've got a training plan, we've got a progression plan, which has worked countless times with people. We've got the blueprint. We're very, very confident in that in the business. We've got the numerous examples that we have through the business as well to kind of really bring that to life. And they're sitting in every single office across the business at
yeah,
every level at the same time. So it's more a case of we talk to a lot of people and say, first of all, trust the process and what that is. But B, if you want the opportunity, I will give you all the tools, all the resources, all the training that comes along with it, as long as you hold up your end of the bargain of working for it and grasping that opportunity. So as I mentioned before, I've got a 22-year-old who in 12 odd months or so has grown a team, started from nothing. He's grown his own personal fee billings. He's then built a team to a team of 5. He's now spearheading opening a team in New York with a view to move over to New York.
amazing.
He's
Yeah,
22. He hasn't got like any prior management experience before joining FB. Most people would say, "Oh, you have to done this for a certain period of time. You then have to prove this, this, and that." We will train him alongside him getting the on the job training experience for it as well. Yes, he'll make some mistakes. Yes, there's some immaturities in there that naturally come along with any sort of 21, 22-year-old as well. Yes, there's patience that needs to be applied to it at the same time. But if he works in the way that he's worked over his first year, of which I've got no hesitations or qualms that he will or won't, um, then he's got all the support and all the patience from us as a business, from me personally as well. And they're the stories that I take the most pride of across the
yeah,
business. I can point to the commission checks that we've paid and the earnings and so on, but it's that progression internally and externally. When I look at, I've got one guy who wanted to buy a house in 5 years in London, and with us, he did it in under 4. He also wanted to realize his dream of moving to New York, and he's realized that with us now. And the only reason it took any longer than his dream was because of COVID, completely out of our hands.
yeah.
So now he's over there living the dream, living in Manhattan, a view of the New York skyline. There's not much else you can ask for, to be honest.
I think again, one of the traits of A players is that they are always going to look to push themselves and have a quest for
Yeah,
learning and growing and developing themselves. And again, when you're looking at your own businesses, making sure that again you are attracting people who are your A players, because I think the old adage that one great player is equivalent to 3 good people. So one A player is equivalent to 3 B players. Give them more money, coach them, develop them, because you know that get the
exactly.
A
Yeah,
players absolutely in the right seats. They are going to be the ones that are driving your business growth, aren't they?
yeah, 100%.
Yeah, good. So, final bit now. Just want to again sort of maybe turn to yourself a bit, if I may. What would you sort of describe as being the biggest challenge that you've had so far in scaling up the FB?
Um, I think over the last few years, especially, a lot has been in the media about balance. And I've never really had a personal balance.
Yeah.
And I think anyone who runs a business understands that as well. But I think there's probably, especially with two young kids, a 4 and a 1 year old. My wife completely relocated down from the northeast down to London first off, then up to Bucks. I mean, we moved into a place just we haven't hit 12 months yet. 2 nights ago, we're kind of talking about how long we're staying here. I've got a vision of 3 years tops,
Yeah.
of where I want to stay in this particular place. I'm used to moving around. She's used to being more settled. I
Mm.
moved around 11 times in 10 years, so I don't tend to sit still. Um, and in trying to strike that balance, and I've been pretty poor at it, not just for my family, but even a personal health perspective and so on as well.
Yeah.
Sacrificed a lot in the pursuit of not for the business, but to hit my own ambitions and own goals. But I think that understanding over the more recent time of just because everyone is promoting balance doesn't mean that my version of balance has to be the same as kind of what's been put out there. If I'm confident, content, happy with whatever that looks like, then I'm okay with that. And some of that's then trying to communicate that out to family and so on as well. But my version of balance doesn't necessarily have to be their version of balance as
Yeah.
well.
And
Um,
it's
so that, but again, that's still a working picture. My sleep at the moment is pretty poor.
I can imagine
Um,
with two young kids.
yeah, I don't know. It's not even down to them. They're
Really?
golden, to be honest, on that
Yeah.
fact. Even through when they were like newborns, it's not down to them. That's again my one of my own making.
Right.
Um, but averaging kind of less than 4 hours a night is
Wow.
not going to do great for me in the later years of my life.
Yeah.
So I'm probably a bit more conscious of that and trying to make steps on that now. They're the things that I probably struggle with the most,
Yeah.
if anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I think it's so important if you're going to be achieving peak performance, be it on the sports field, in the boardroom, or in the theatre, you have to make sure that you get the balance right so that you can serve everyone, not just the business, but your family and I guess friends and all those things. It's I think it's a really important point that you make there. Just how do you stay on top of your game?
Um, Through sheer drive and will.
Yeah.
It's not for being well rested, I can assure you that.
Yeah.
Plenty of caffeine.
Yeah.
Um, do you know what it is? I don't know how healthy this is. Fear.
Interesting.
Fear is probably the
Interesting.
number one thing for me.
Yeah. Fear of what?
Fear of, I'd probably say primarily, I believe in myself and I've got confidence, but fear of looking back at life thinking I didn't meet my potential. I
Hmm.
could have achieved X. I could have worked harder. I could have been more focused. I could have been more dedicated. That fear of regret is probably the number one thing that drives me.
It's interesting. I've heard that before, Andy. This notion of a sort of biggest regrets that you could have when you get to the pearly gates one day and someone says to you, well, look what you could have become of yourself. And
Yeah, you get it's attributed to Steve Jobs, whether it actually sprang from him or not, I'm not sure. But on your kind of deathbed of saying, looking back at my life, I wish I didn't work as much as I did, or that's not one of my key things. And you hear that a lot, right?
yeah,
And at the moment, anyway, not to say that my mindset or approach this won't ever change, but at the moment, I don't think of it as if I kind of picture my end, if I'm given the opportunity to do so, I don't think I'll look back and say I should have worked more or less. I think I would look back and say, did I fulfill my potential?
yeah,
And I don't want to look back with that regret at the time of thinking, do you know what? I could have done more. And it's not a money thing or a personal wealth thing or anything like that. It is purely of a could I have achieved more out there in the world? Could I have tested myself more?
yeah,
Could I have pushed my limits and my boundaries more? And they're all like heavily intertwined to each other as well.
yeah.
And it's that fear that really, really drives me.
Yeah, I guess again that's probably sort of similar to elite athletes that again having been able to push themselves or stretch themselves out their comfort zone to that place where they are on the top, very top level of their field. And I mentioned that the different things drive different people. What does high performance mean to you?
High performance, I mean, I'm trying to think of one way to encompass it without sounding, I guess, kind of too cliched. I think high performance to me is actually, here you go. It's something that I came across pretty recently. I can't remember where, but high performance for me, I would say, is the way you do anything is the way you do everything. And I probably, if I could encompass it into one thing, hopefully I don't sound too cliched in that,
Yeah.
I would probably bring it down to that. The way you do anything is the way you do everything.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's sets down, a real intent in terms of, I guess, for yourself personally, and I guess then as a leader, people would like to follow leaders. By setting that example, you're probably giving that, casting it off to lots and lots of people who work alongside you. Love that. I guess if you had your time all over again, what's one piece of advice that you would offer someone who's thinking about starting up a business today?
Ooh, stay true to your path, stay true to your focus.
Very good advice.
Probably those two things.
Yeah, I love it. And then final question, always after it on the podcast. What book
Okay.
are you reading at the moment, or what podcast or Audible are you listening to?
So I actually stopped Audibles. I used to listen to Audibles quite heavily. I stopped them because I wasn't taking enough away to implement anything at the end of it. So the few things that I'm doing at the moment, I listen to Master Scale podcasts
Yeah,
because I think there's some invaluable advice that comes through there. I'm signed up to something called Masterclass, which is an online platform. So, for instance, I've just completed Chris Voss's Art of Negotiation, having read his book.
yeah,
Um, and there's just a few more kind of practical implementations off there. Probably get it from the book, but I think it was a chance to re-emphasize what I took away from the book, and so on. The book that I'm 93% through finishing at the moment is Tim Grover's Winning. So
okay,
Tim Grover is famous for, well, two of his famous clients that he coached and trained was Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. So knows the thing about high performance, excellence, sacrifice, and so on. Completed his book Relentless, which I think was his first book, and his second more recent book was Winning. So I'm about 93% of the way through that at the moment, and then Good to Great is the next one on the list on the Kindle.
yeah. So, and if there's one key takeout from the Winning book, what would that be?
So probably one of the things that I'm enjoying exploring at the moment is he talks about those who really excel in their field, they all have a dark side. Whether they want to admit it or not, there's
Yeah,
something in some way that they have, whether that is utter selfishness, heartlessness, whatever that might be,
yeah,
everyone has a dark side. And it was only when I read that book where I thought, like, I've often kind of thought about my own dark side, but didn't know that it was a wider kind of concept or a wider thing. Thought maybe that's just, I don't know if it's immoral is the right word, but maybe if that was my internal dark side that I didn't, no one else kind of shared or understood. So I've never really voiced it. So to read it about it in the book and to hear him talk about how others have spoken to them about their dark side, guess not maybe vindicated it, but it gave me a bit more assurance, I guess, and a bit of peace.
it's sage advice indeed, and we'll make sure that we'll put a reference to Winning in the show notes, as well as the masterclass. I think it's this huge sort of resource that's now available to a lot of us that's taking some amazing content and allowing us to learn, I guess, at our own pace, or
Yeah,
whatever's top of
yeah.
mind at the moment. So we'll certainly put that in there as well. Roheel, so many thanks for joining us on this edition of the Entrepreneurs at Scale podcast. It's been fascinating to listen to your journey that you've been on. Thank you so much for sharing some top tips around hiring, attracting top talent. I know that's going to be really, really impactful for so many listeners, and for sharing your story, and good luck in terms of
No,
getting
thanks
out
for
to
having me.
60 million or beyond.
Hopefully beyond.
Yeah, many thanks again.
All right, brilliant. All the best. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Entrepreneurs at Scale podcast. If you'd be kind enough to leave a review, it would really help other like-minded entrepreneurs find the podcast and grow our community. Click on the subscribe button to be kept in the loop for all future podcasts, and go to the show notes for additional reading resources and links to our guest. Until next time, thank you so much.